Hello everyone and welcome to the Global Mapper webinar for the month of August. My name is Josie McKnight. I'm an application specialist here at Blue Marble Geographics. With me today is David McKittrick.
Hi Josie, and hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's webinar. The topic for today's webinar, as you can see on your screen, is using the Digitizer in Global Mapper. Digitizer is a very commonly used tool. Basically, it's the function that allows you to interact with vector features. You can create vector features. You can edit your vector features. Do a lot of drawing, do a lot of doodling, as they say. We're going to go through a lot of those functions today, showing you some of those common tools. Josie's going to be sharing some of the basic tools. We're also going to be looking at maybe some of the tools you may have not encountered or may have not used. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone today. But before we get started, we're going to have a couple of housekeeping issues to cover.
Yes, that's right, David. All webinars attendees are currently in listen-only mode. However, if you'd like to ask a question, you can use the questions tool on the GoToWebinar panel to the right of your screen. Blue Marble Product Specialist will try to answer your questions as they're submitted, and will also address any outstanding questions after the presentation.
No, that's right, and many of you have attended many of our webinars before. You know we repeat this, but it is worth mentioning once again the email address at the bottom of your screen. Some of my colleagues are sitting upstairs helping customers right now, so we have that ongoing email address. If you have any questions, geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com. The lines are always open, and we try to respond as quickly as we can to your questions as they come in. We will repeat that. We'll give you this email address again at the end of the presentation today. We are starting to ramp up our travel and conference plans for the coming months.
Yes, in September we'll be at EURISA GIS Pro 2014 in New Orleans, Louisiana. September 8th we'll be at the Maine GIS Users Conference in Winter Harbor, Maine. And September 22nd we'll be at GIS in the Rockies, Grand Junction, Colorado. So if you're planning to attend any of these events, we encourage you to stop by the Blue Marble booth.
Yeah, and I believe for most of those events, I know for EURISA and the main GIS User Conference, we're also delivering some presentations. I believe it's the same at the GIS in the Rockies show. So if you are there, you will have a chance to hear a presentation. I believe at the EURISA show we're actually doing 2 presentations. So great chance to learn about what we're doing. And again, as Josie mentioned, we can stop by our booth and find out more about our products and meet some of the staff, obviously, as well. One that we do not have on this slide coming up in October, we figured we'd just cover September's travel. Actually, Josie and I are heading across the Atlantic. We're going to be in Germany at the InterGeo conference in Berlin. We're very excited. We're looking forward to that huge event. So if you are planning to be there, again, please stop by. And again, we have a presentation at the InterGeo conference. Also coming up very soon, something we've been reminding you about, our Blue Marble User Conference. Goes, you should take over. I can't talk anymore.
Okay, that's fine. We'll be in Calgary and Houston on September 8th and October 30th, respectively. It's a great opportunity to learn how folks in different industries use the Blue Marble applications and to network with those users as well. Global Mapper and Geographic Calculator will be forefront there, so come on by, and space is filling up quickly, so be sure to sign up today.
And I believe somebody's doing a training class at the Calgary show. I believe that's you, Josie. So we will be offering training as well, and in both locations. I know the Calgary class is also filling up. It's a very popular class when we offer it in Calgary. So again, information about all of these events on our website. You can see the website specifically for BMUC right here on our slide. Also, while you're on the website, go look at some of the training opportunities. Again, moving into the autumn and winter time, we are going to be offering a lot more training. So please, again, check on our website. Back to today, back to the Digitizer. This is what we're going to be covering today. This is going to be very basic information by way of introduction. We're going to talk about some of the basic digitizing or drawing functions. Before we even get to that level, we're going to define exactly what the Digitizer is, and obviously that level of content is primarily intended for those of you who are fairly new to Global Mapper, or maybe those of you who have dropped in today and have never actually seen Global Mapper before. So we're going to cover the basics. We're going to talk about some of the configuration options. This would be useful for those of you who have been using the tool for a while. Give you some information, some suggestions, if you like, as to how to configure the tool to work best in your situation. Not only is the Digitizer used for drawing, for creating features, but it's also a tool for editing features. So we'll spend some time today talking about the editing capabilities of the Digitizer, the ability to import a file and then make some modifications to that file, the geometric modifications to that file. Specifically, we're going to take a look at COGO. This is a function I always like to make sure that people are aware of. COGO stands for coordinate geometry. I believe Josie's going to be doing this section. We're going to talk about how you can generate or create a feature, not by digitizing or drawing manually, but by entering the dimensions, the parameters, the direction bearing and or distance for those features. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about converting features. When I talk about converting, I mean if you've got a series of points, can you create a line or can you create an area? In other words, if you walked around the boundary of a property, how do I create an area for that within which I can determine the area value for my feature? So we'll talk about some of those conversion options. I will make sure I address the ever-lengthening Digitizer right-click menu. Those who have been with Global Mapper for a while will be aware of the fact that we have condensed the menu, but it is expanding again as we add new tools. You will find there's a lot of hidden functionality in there. It's worthwhile spending some time just going through those menus and finding out what new tools have been added. And by way of wrapping up and time dependent, we'll talk a little bit about some tips and tricks within the application. Some maybe hidden features, some suggestions again about how to use the Digitizer tool to its best ability. I'm going to begin by bringing up the application, by bringing up Global Mapper. And I'm going to quickly unload my current setup. Let me just go use my keyboard shortcut to bring us back to the default screen again. And let's just go back into the zoom tool. Let's cancel that for the time being. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So here, this is the entry point for Global Mapper. The Digitizer tool, if you want to look at specifically at where the tool is located, is right at my cursor position right now. This is the tool that controls the drawing or digitizing functionality within the software. Older versions of Global Mapper required you to activate this tool as the means to actually create features. And you'll notice my cursor along the bottom level of buttons in my toolbar. These are the digitizing tools. These are the tools that enable you to draw, to trace, to create features, and to edit features as well, or modify features. But the whole process was triggered by the activation of the Digitizer tool. We'll have changed that approach slightly in more recent versions, where you can actually go straight to the tool that you're interested in. So if I open up Global Mapper and I immediately want to use my line tool, for instance, you can simply select that button. That is active. I no longer have to activate the digitizing functionality for that purpose. So basically the Digitizer, as I said before, is the tool that allows you to interact with your vector features on the map. Let me take a quick look at some of the basic tools before I hand over to Josie, and for this I'm actually going to bring up some sample data. Those of you who have attended previous webinars will know we've drawn attention to the fact that we now have a button in the intro screen that allows you to view some sample data we provide with the application. We've provided a map of the world. These are vector features. So with my Digitizer activated now, I can now interact with these features. You will notice after activating that tool, the cursor has changed. I think previously I had the zoom tool active. You'll notice now it says edit. In its native form, the Digitizer is an editing tool. It's waiting for me to select something. Perhaps the island of Iceland here in the North Atlantic, or perhaps Algeria. Selecting that feature allows me to perform certain actions. I can delete, I can move, I can reconfigure, I can do multiple things with that selected feature. And as we go through the presentation today, we'll show you some of the tools that we can apply using this edit mode. As I said again, in its native format, in its original format, it is an editing tool. The tool also allows you to create or select specific functions to create features. Areas, lines, we've got point tools. We're going to be looking at all of those in just a few minutes. But again, that requires the selection of the individual tool itself. Now, in my introduction, I introduced you to the idea of the right-click. Basically the way to get to most of the advanced Digitizer functionality. And certainly we have shortcuts in the toolbar that let you quickly generate features or modify features, but the real strength of the Digitizer is in our right-click menu. Now, having previously selected a feature on the map, I now have the option to right-click and apply settings to that feature. You'll notice right at the top is my edit. I can edit certain parameters. I'm going to bypass actually looking at that dialog box for the time being because Josie's going to be sharing that with us in a few minutes. We can move the feature, we can delete the feature, we can clear our selection if necessary. And then you'll notice a number of submenus for creating new features. And again, as I said, for older versions of Global Mapper, the length of options in this list became so long that we actually had to divide it into submenus. And now some of these submenus are getting quite long as well. And this is a testament to the strength and the functionality that we've been adding into Global Mapper. So in essence, what you're seeing on the screen right now is the core of the Digitizer functionality, accessed through this right-click menu. Now, many of you may consider the right-click option to be a little inconvenient. You know, what if I'm continually creating a certain type of feature? Why do I have to right-click every time to do that? It seems very laborious. If that represents something that represents your workflow, then by all means use the keyboard shortcuts options. I'm not going to go over that functionality today, but you can essentially select any of the digitizing tools, apply a keyboard shortcut, and through selection of that keyboard shortcut you can initiate the creation or the editing of the feature that you've selected. So you can make your workflow a lot more streamlined. The other thing to note about the Digitizer tool is the creation of features on the screen does not directly affect the file that was used to import those features. In other words, if I import a shapefile with some features in it, let's say it's a shapefile with some property boundaries or parcels, and I want to digitize a new property boundary, that digitizing function only applies the new geometric feature to your local instance of Global Mapper. It does not apply it to the original file. Now, this is a basic file management concern within Global Mapper, or issue within Global Mapper. If you want to apply that to the original file, you would need to export. So just by way of kind of paving the way for the Digitizer, we're not interacting directly with the original files. Rather, we're modifying Global Mapper's version of those, allowing us then to export to retain the functionality, to retain the new features in the original file. One final thing I want to talk about by way of introduction is the configuration dialog box. There are several sections of our configuration window, and by the way, I just simply click the configure button in the toolbar, sixth button from the left in my setup. The key tab here reflecting the Digitizer is vector display. Under vector display, we can do things like filtering the visibility of certain types of features. If we do not want to render areas or lines or points, we can, at a high level, just simply uncheck the appropriate box. We can filter what's selectable, or we can filter individual feature types, and I want to get to that in just a second. We've also got an array of checkboxes at the bottom that let us dictate or adjust the behavior of the Digitizer. There are a couple I want to point out to you at this stage before we actually get into digitizing. The rendering of vertices. We're going to introduce you to what a vertex is, vertices being the plural. The shape points essentially that define the outline of an area or the path of a line. They will not be rendered by default, but you can turn them on. You can turn them on at all times, which I personally would not recommend, or you can just simply turn them on when you have selected a feature. And obviously that would be required if you want to modify the geometry or the shape of a feature on the map. So those are a couple of options in there, and we'll be coming back to those a little bit later. Another one is the highlight function. Now, you will have noticed when I selected it, it's been deselected again, but I selected the country of Algeria. Indication that was selected was a hatch pattern, which works in many situations, but there are certain situations where it's probably not as intuitive. And I like to change my setting to only highlighting the border of a selected area feature. And you'll see the consequence of that in just a second. Highlighting the border basically means that I'll get an outline, a bold outline indicating again what has been selected. We'll just apply that for the time being, leaving the window open. A couple of other things I want to show you in here related to snapping. Now, snapping in the context of drawing is basically whether you want a feature to connect to an existing feature. Within a certain pixel threshold, it will actually jump and make sure it's connected. There are many, many situations where that is useful, but there are also situations where you'll want to disable that. If you want a more precise digitizing tool that lets you very precisely place a line, for instance, without it jumping to its neighbor, you can disable that functionality, and that is on by default. So those are just some of the highlights of the configuration, the vector display configuration. I mentioned the fact that you can filter by type. Before I hand over to Josie, I'm going to do one more thing. Under our area styles, we have a number of pre-configured styles that can be applied to digitized features. I'm going to add a new one in here, and I want to call it fields. because I believe when Josie takes over, she's actually going to do some drawing, and she may actually draw a field for us. So I'm going to have a feature type prepared for her. So rather than it appearing as a generic on-filled outlined polygon, she can actually apply whatever colors we select. And I'm going to assume that most fields will be green, so I'm going to make this a solid green color. And hopefully this will work later, that Josie will see my fields area type. Area types are basically a way that you can apply pre-configured symbology or pre-configured shading or pre-configured attributes to features that you digitize. And I strongly encourage you, if you are using the Digitizer tool, to spend some time looking at the feature types. You can filter these. There are options for removing what you don't need. I'm not going to open the dialog box right now, and leaving just the features that you would typically use. So that by way of introduction to the Digitizer. I am going to quickly clean off the mess I made on the map, and I want to hand over to Josie. And Josie is going to talk a little bit about some of the basic digitizing tools. Let's go ahead and load a workspace and hand over to Josie.
Okay, so thanks, David. We are going to go through some of the basic drawing tools at the moment. You can find them in the toolbar and from the right-click menu. So I'm just going to choose the area feature. It's the first one here. I'm going to outline this field. So left-click, keep going around. And then when I'm happy with the results and I want to close the field, I'm going to right-click. And so this is the box that the dialog that pops up when after you create a feature. It's going to pop up every time unless you change some of the settings. So we're going to start by naming it. We'll call it field 1, and we're going to give it a feature type. And just like David said earlier, we can give it the feature type that he created, fields. And as you can see here, this is a snapshot of what it's going to look like once it's created. The next section here is feature layer. User created features is the default selection here. This is not always the best option. You can use this to select an existing layer where you might have other fields or other area features saved, or you can create a new one. So we're just going to choose that there. The next section we're going to look at is styles. So we have already alluded to this. The feature style is as David had assigned. But if you want to change the style for just this instance for this feature type, you can select this radio button here. You can change the color. I'm just going to keep it the same, but it's that same process. So we're going to use the default style. One other thing you can add is attributes. These are the automatic attributes that are added. They're the basic geometry, but we can add something else to this if we want to. Let's go with crop type and choose corn. Okay, and then the last thing I want to mention here is this checkbox at the bottom. Automatically apply these settings to new features of the same type. So every time you create an area feature or any feature, this box will come up. But if you select this option here and you continue to make area features, they will automatically show up with the same settings. So you will not have this modify feature info box again. So I'm just going to click OK, and I need to add a name for the layer that I'm creating. Oops, I can type today. We'll just call it fields, and we have our area feature. The next
Just sorry, Josie, that I should emphasize that function or that tool that Josie mentioned at the bottom of the screen took many years to implement, years of requesting, because a lot of people who digitize a lot of features, there is a redundancy in that dialog box. If every feature has the same characteristics, why do I need to confirm every time? So that checkbox is extremely useful. It could theoretically cut your workflow down by a significant amount, and certainly something I would suggest if you're doing a lot of digitizing you really make use of. Josie, do you want to show folks how if you actually want to create a different type of area feature, how that works with the right-click options, where you can actually change the back to the default again? So yeah, you can remove the auto create features option if it's selected in here.
Okay, great. So let's move on to lines. We have our line tool. We're going to left click with the mouse, click where you want to add vertices, and when you're ready to close the line or finish the line, right click and you get the same modify feature info box, and you can update this. We can choose residential roads. I think that was an option here, and that's going to apply that specific style. We can create a new layer, and we can even name it if we want to, and go OK. And we can add our new layer as roads, and you can see the line here that is in the residential road style. The other line mode is here. It's the trace mode, and I'm just going to go through it quickly. You left click and drag across the screen, and when you release the mouse, you are brought to the modify feature info, and you can add any settings you want, as we've discussed. And the last point I'm going to show is the point tool. It's right here. Left click where you want your point to be, and the modify feature info dialog will arrive. If we wanted to get more specific, say I clicked on a building, we can choose from a variety of options in the feature type and end up with a different point style. So we're going to choose building. We'll add a new layer, and we'll just go OK. And you can see the point has shown up as the building style. Okay, I think that's it for the basics.
Yeah, and I think if you don't leave the webinar today with any other information, if you forget everything else we said, what Josie has covered in the last 5-7 minutes really is the essence of how the digitizer works. Creating basic lines, points, area features. That modify feature info dialog box is the core of the management of your features. Get familiar with that, get familiar with some of the options in there, and again, as Josie suggested, you've got the user created features as a default. I would strongly encourage you, as would we all, name your layers appropriately. Assign something to the appropriate layer rather than just putting it into that catch-all layer. So that is the basics. Excellent work. I'm actually going to save your workspace so you can go back and admire your works of art later. This is the essence of what we're doing today is artistic, so we might as well appreciate our artwork. So let's move on a little bit here. Josie started with the creation process, and we are going to be coming back to creating features, more advanced features a little bit later. I'm going to wipe the slate clean. I'm going to bring up another workspace here. We're going to talk about the modification of features. I'm going to open up a layer that many of you who have attended webinars may have seen a version of this before. This is just some town boundaries. These are obviously pre-existing geometric features. We imported, in this case, a shapefile. Perhaps our use of Global Mapper is to modify these, to make some changes to these. I'm going to show you some of those modifications that can be applied. Again, as I mentioned at the start, the process for interacting with a feature is using your editor, using your digitizer in its edit mode, in its native mode. There's my edit cursor, and you will notice now when I select that, the configuration change I made previously where I removed the hatch pattern, now I've got this outline pattern. I personally find that a little easier in terms of determining what has been selected. But now that has been selected, I have a number of options I can apply to this feature. Easiest option, probably most simple to understand, is simply, you can't see what I'm doing here, I'm just going to use the delete key on my keyboard, and I'm going to delete that feature. Let me make sure, actually, there we go. Now, note to self, make sure you change your configuration. You're actually seeing a version of this feature, actually a grayed out version, and the reason for that is because one of the options I did enable was to render my deleted features. I want to let you into a little secret. Global Mapper doesn't actually delete anything. It lets you believe you're deleting something, but it actually puts it in a deleted form. It's not visible, and it will not export, but it technically is still there, and that's actually a good thing, because it allows you to undelete it if necessary. You can bring it back from the dead, so to speak. I can do that in a couple of ways. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control Z or Control Z, depending on where you are in the world, and you'll see it's come right back into place again. There is also an option when we right-click on that feature to delete it, and once again, undelete it is available here as well. While I'm in this menu, let's go to the options. Now, the options you'll see at the bottom of this right-click menu mirror many of those that we saw in the configuration dialog box, including render deleted features, which I'd forgotten I enabled earlier. So I'm going to disable that one for the time being. So my disabled or my deleted feature is now invisible. and for all intents and purposes it's gone. If I export this file, I have applied that modification, it is gone. So that's one of the most basic editing tools, simply deleting. Keyboard, delete button, or right-click delete, either will work. Another one that a lot of people use is a move function. I'm going to right-click again, and we have an entire submenu for moving and reshaping features. I'll pause briefly so you can read down some of the options in here. We certainly won't have a chance to get to all of these, but the one at the top is probably the one that people will use most commonly, Move Area Feature. I'll go ahead and select that one now, and you will see that my cursor now says Move, and I can drag that poor unfortunate town to a new location. And basically that's how it works. Now, if I wanted to bring that back to its original location, we also, through right-clicking and from the same menu, have a restore option. So whatever modification you apply, whatever edits you apply to a feature, don't worry. You can always restore it back to its original shape. So we'll go ahead and restore, and it's prompting me to verify that that's what I want to do, and it is, and it's back to where it was. So those are two of the basic modification functions that can be applied. One of my favorite keyboard shortcuts, by the way, is when you hold the Alt button on your keyboard. You can't see me doing that, but you have to believe me, I am doing that. And you select a feature, I'm immediately in move mode. I don't have to go to the menu in this case. And you'll notice again, I can move that to a new location. So that's a nice keyboard shortcut. If your intention is to move features around, hold that Alt button down while you select it, and it will automatically do that. What about adding features to an existing layer? That's an interesting one. Let's move off the coast a little bit because I don't want to interfere with any of the other towns. I'm going to repeat some of the digitizing functions that Josie had shown you before. I'm just going to use my area tool very quickly, but let's pretend there's a new island formed off the coast of Maine. I'm going to right-click. It's not a field this time. It's actually a town. So we'll go ahead and assign it to the proper feature type. We'll call it towns. And I want to put it in this layer as well. Now, you will notice at the bottom a couple of options which Josie bypassed because they're more relevant to what we're doing now. If we're digitizing something, we can actually apply the settings from something that was previously selected. Now, I don't have anything selected right now. Let's go ahead and we'll start that process again so we can actually see the end result. Let's go ahead and select a feature. Now, again, I'll begin the digitizing process. And again, apply the settings I said before. We'll make this a town. And we'll put it in the same layer. We're adding to our towns layer, and apply settings from a selected feature. Look at the attribute table right in here when I do that, and you'll notice it populates the attributes automatically. I can also automatically apply these settings, so every new town that I create, I don't have to populate this attribute table manually. I've derived these attribute fields from something that already existed. Now, this combination of functionality really significantly improves the digitizing process for many users because it streamlines that attribution process. I'll simply click OK on this. My new feature has been created. It's inherited the entire structure, the attribute structure from an existing feature. I did in literally seconds what would have taken me several minutes to do previously. So that's a new function that's been added in the last couple of releases of Global Mapper. Let's look at a couple of other digitizing tools. Let's look at a very basic one here. I'm going to draw a line, and let's assume this is perhaps a road, and maybe there's an intersection in the middle of the road. I'm going to split this line at a specific intersection. Right now it's a single line with several shape points. The way that I would split the line is to first of all visualize the vertices. Now, I introduced this at the start of the presentation as well. Vertices are not going to be visible by default, but I can enable that in my options menu to show area and line vertices. That would be for all features. I don't want to do that, but instead I want to render the vertices for my selected feature, which is the second of those two options. So now I can actually see the shape points that are used to make that feature, and I can select an individual vertex. Now, you'll notice when I do that, that particular vertex is now highlighted. I can do all sorts of things with this as well. Moving it, I can split a line, I can define a specific location for this vertex. I'll get to those functions in just a little bit. I'm going to right-click, and you'll see when I right-click with a vertex selected, we have a vertex editing menu. Again, we'll come back and look at those in just a little bit. What I want to do is crop, combine, or split this. I want to split my feature at that vertex. And there is a toolbar button that will do this as well, by the way. We'll simply initiate that, and now I have two lines instead of one. It's a very simple little modification tool, taking two line segments, or taking one line segment and making two from that. Let's take a look at some of the other cropping tools. This is a very useful one. By the way, you can see how much of a mess I'm making of the state of Maine here. Let's draw a simple square feature here. I'm just going to draw an area right in the middle of the state. In this case, I don't want to make it a town. I'm just going to make it an unknown feature. And we'll put it back in what I've told you not to do, our user-created features. Now, this is just a temporary feature, so we're not overly concerned. Now, you'll see the outline of this this feature right here. I'm going to select it as well. I'm going to use this as the basis to crop down the additional towns, to constrain them to the border. And again, through my right-click menu, under Crop, Combine, Split Functions, the tool that I'm going to do is to crop the loaded features to a selected area. And we'll put them in a new layer. So I'm going to, again, select New Layer for this feature. It will prompt me to name it. And we'll leave all of the other settings as they are. And you'll notice an option here, which is an interesting one, where you can keep the data outside rather than inside. So what we're going to do is essentially constrain the extent of our towns to what's inside that area, but you can invert that if necessary. We'll create a new layer. I'm just going to call it Test, and we'll click OK. And the easiest way to see this is to turn off my original layer in the Overlay Control Center. And you'll notice basically a simple little cropping tool taking the full extent of my towns, limiting to the box that I've just created. We'll go ahead and we'll close that new layer that I just created, and we'll also close our user-created features and bring back our towns again. So, simple little cropping tool. In my case, I didn't apply this to the original layer, so the original layer is still intact. Interesting one. Donuts. Who likes donuts? I think everybody likes donuts. We're going to create a donut today. We're going to choose, again, an unsuspecting town, and I'm going to use another cropping tool to put a hole in this feature. This is quite common, reasonably common in real estate, where a property is actually contained within another property. And in order to determine the precise area, you need to compensate for the hole in the middle, so to speak. Once again, I'm going to use a simple rectangle to define the area of the middle. And again, I'm not overly concerned about the parameters of this particular feature. I'll just simply confirm. Now, this internal area is essentially my cookie cutter. I'm going to stamp out the middle of the surrounding polygon using this polygon. And the way that works is, again, initiated through the right-click menu. We're going to go to the Crops, Combine, Split Functions again, and we're going to cut the selected area from another area. And when I select that option, my cursor, if you can see it, says Parent. It's asking me to choose what feature to cut from. So I'm going to select the outer polygon. Just simply click anywhere in that outer polygon. Would I like to have the area removed being deleted? I would. And you'll now see I have a hole in the polygon. The area, if we calculated the area for this, it would not include the area in the middle. Now what's interesting about this hole is it is its own geometric feature. I still have the option to move the vertices around, to modify the shape, and I can even move it, just like I would move any other feature. So I can move the hole to a new location if I want. So it's very interesting. It's kind of a geometry within a geometry. But the ultimate result is, as I said, maybe the best way to describe it is a donut. It's a polygon with a hole in the middle. So that's a function that's been in Global Mapper for quite some time. Very, very useful. A couple of others I'm going to hand back to Josie again. Let's talk about grouping polygons. I'm going to draw two polygons here very quickly, just as examples. And again, I'm not concerned about their feature type. Now, let's say this is a situation where here are two islands that essentially comprise the same municipality. Geometrically, they're obviously separated. They're not connected. They shouldn't be associated with each other. But the internal attribution, the organization and management of those should be done collectively. Now, we have a tool in Global Mapper that will allow you to apply this. I'm going to select them both. And by the way, my vertexes are still active. That's why you're seeing those. We don't need them in this case. But the option I'm going to apply here is a right-click option where we can go to Advanced Feature Creation Options, and we can group those polygons. Now, if I select Group, nothing initially changes. In fact, using my Digitizer, I can still individually select them, individually modify them, move the vertices around to whatever I need. The evidence that they're now grouped is in my Feature Info tool. Now, the Feature Info tool, for those not familiar with Global Mapper, is the way to expose the attributes for a feature. Now, if I select either one of these, You'll notice they're both now highlighted. My window is off the side of my screen slightly, but you'll see they're now both highlighted, meaning the information that's associated with these features applies to both collectively. One final thing before we hand over to Josie to talk a little bit about Kogo. This is a question we get quite frequently. How do I move features from one layer to another? Let's say these two features I just created actually are towns. I put them in their own layer. How do I get them into another layer? Well, there's a couple of ways of doing that. As with most applications, Global Mapper supports the standard copy and paste functions. You can see in the edit menu, copy selected feature, or you can cut and then paste. You can also paste and keep a copy on your clipboard if you want to paste it a number of times. We're all familiar with Control-C and Control-V in the Windows world. And if I initiate that process, you'll see a dialog box appearing asking me where I want to paste those to. And I can paste them into a new layer, paste them into an existing layer. So that's the simplest way to move or copy features into from one layer into another. The other way, just so we kind of complete the story, is to go through our edit function again. Now I'm going to bring up the dialog box that Josie introduced in the last section, the modify feature info dialog box, where she established the parameters of the fields that she created. Well, within this dialog box we have a target layer, and again we can choose an alternative layer if necessary. I can move these right into my main towns layer. And they're in the main towns layer now. So a couple of different ways of moving features from one layer to another. Any questions coming in there, Josie?
Let's see. Here's a question. How do I draw a circle? I think I'm just about to cover that one. And
that's a good one. Yeah, somebody must have read our script. Yeah, circles are not actually one of the tools that are accessible from the toolbar. There's a range rings tool. We may have a chance to get to that a little bit later. But the circle tool is actually one of those right-click options. I think, Josie, you are going to take a look at that one. So any others coming in?
Okay. Can I use the Digitizer to add text to the map?
Text. Yeah. Actually, Josie, you quickly went through adding points. And I think you made your point building, I believe. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to quickly put another point on the map. One of the symbol or feature types when you add a point to the map is a feature type called text. And if I go down my list here alphabetically, you'll see it's listed right here, text. The text point is, as it implies, text. Obviously, you'll need to give it a name for the actual text to appear on the screen, but there is no symbol. There's no accompanying point or icon or symbol on the map. So that text was added several generations ago. Previously, you could actually have created your own feature type called text and just made the symbol null. Now we have a pre-configured feature type. So keep those questions coming in. And again, our colleagues in the background will answer some, and we'll answer those that we can. So, Josie, going to talk a little bit about what we would consider maybe to be some of the more advanced digitizer tools.
Yes, I am. I'm just going to unload this workspace here. Oh, I won't save it. Sorry, David. And I'm going to start by using a blank slate, choosing the Digitizer tool here. I'm just going to zoom in to a more reasonable scale. And I am going to choose the Kogo tool. So I'm going to...
Remind us again what Kogo stands for, Josie. Coordinate geometry. Coordinate geometry.
Coordinate geometry. Thank you. Sorry. All right, and there's two ways to get here. You can use this tool at the top, or you can use right-click, create a line feature, and go to Kogo. Great. So now that we're here, we start by left-clicking the first vertices and at the location you want, and then you are brought to this dialog box, and here you can enter a distance and a bearing. So I'm just going to try to find a relevant distance to show here. So let's go 200 kilometers, and we'll choose 30 degrees, and we'll go add points. And you see a line has been created. So basically we created the second point after we clicked on the map to choose the first one, and the line is 200 kilometers long and at the bearing that we specified. So you notice the dialog box is still open. We can keep adding points to create our display, and this tool has really come from the surveying world, so that's something that's really beneficial to people working in that business, but obviously it's here for anyone to use. So we'll go and we'll add another point. This time we'll just choose bearing as angle from the previous line segment and go add a point.
So that checkbox is also fairly new, an important one. Previously, everything was based on a bearing relative to true north. Now, our bearings are based on our bearings can be based actually on an angle from the previous line segment. So that's another significant enhancement of this tool.
Great. So just to complete that feature, we'll click Done, and we'll be brought back to our Modify Feature Info dialog box. I'm just going to click OK here and move on to the next advanced digitizer tool. I'm going to clear the workspace and bring in another one. Alright, minimize this. So I want to draw a rectangle around the top of this building. We have the rectangle tool. I want it to be a perfect rectangle, but this rectangle will be not on the angle of the building here. So we have another option. So just choose the digitizer, right click, and create an area, and we're looking to draw a rotated rectangle. So here we go. I'm just gonna click in the corners of this side of the building and then draw the box across. I don't have anything selected with a mouse. I just do the 2 points and then draw the box across. And to close the area feature, I'm going to left click, and we're brought back to this, the Modify Feature Info box. The next option is, or next tool we're going to go over is to draw a circle, as was asked in that question. So I'm just going to choose the digitizer, right click, area feature again, create circle. This time where I click will be the center of the circle, and I'll drag the circle out to the distance that I want. And you can see it there. You can keep repeating the option because the tool is still selected. Now if you want to create a circle of a certain diameter, you can choose another option. Right click, create area, and we're going to go with the range ring tool. Here it is. And I'm going to click where I want the center of the circle to be, and I'll be given an option. This is also a tool to create concentric circles, but I just want to create one, and I want it to be, let's say, 100 meters across. I'm going to click OK, and there's that circle there. So let's see. The next feature we're going to create is a square area with a fixed ground area. So I'm going to select the digitizer, right click, area, square area, fixed ground area, and we can choose the size that's appropriate that we want our feature to be, knowing that, as David showed us, once it's created we can move it around, or it will show up where I clicked on the screen. So click OK, and here we can drop it down on that building. Left click to establish, and then we can adjust the feature information if we want. Okay, let's see what's next. One final advanced feature to cover here. We're going to do a points. We haven't done any points yet in this section. Create point at position. And you can see it's populated here with the coordinates, but you can adjust that if you know where you want your point to be. And click OK, and you're brought right back to the same tool.
Yeah, that point as position is, again, one that we're asked quite frequently. You know, I want to generate a point. I know exactly where it should be. I don't want to have to click on the map. I've got the precise X and Y values. You could probably import the file as a text file if you want to do it that way, or just populate the fields in that dialog box that Josie just showed you. A lot of very interesting tools. We showed you a very small subsection of some of those, what we consider more advanced digitizing tools, and I love your artistic talent here, Josie. I think we'll have to keep this one and maybe frame this or put it on the wall. We tend to doodle a lot, as I mentioned at the start. I've got a couple more that I want to show you. Maybe some of you may have used these, some of you may not have used them. I'm sorry, I'm going to not save the workspace. Let's take a look at another workspace here. Let's bring up some roads. These roads are essentially centerline roads. These are linear features. I'm going to show you the process of generating buffers. A buffer is essentially an area feature that's derived from extending out from an existing feature, basically. I'm going to select the roads in this layer. And the easiest way for me to select it, by the way, is to right-click on the layer and select all. Right down here in the menu, select all features in the layer. You'll notice they're now highlighted. I still have my vertices on there. They're still visible as well. This is going to be the basis of what I'm going to buffer. The buffering tool is another digitizer tool. It creates a vector layer. It's an area layer. Button in the toolbar, right where my cursor is, right over here towards the right-hand side, or there's a right-click option, as there is with most of the tools. And I can establish the buffer parameters. I'm just going to generate one buffer around my roads. The roads currently, as I said, are lines. I want them to reflect the actual width of the roadbed itself. Let's assume this is something in the region of maybe 5 meters from the center line. That will be a 10-meter swath, and we'll see what the results of that are. Now, to speed this process up, I'm actually going to limit the extent of this. In fact, I'm just going to select manually just a number of these roads, just so we can see the results a little more quickly here. So again, we'll buffer one more time, keeping our 5-meter buffer width. We just need one buffer zone for each feature. That's fine. We are going to combine any overlapping buffers. So in other words, where the roads intersect, it will not kind of overlap the buffers. And we'll simply click OK. And you'll see the results of that. You'll see now that we have area features with the roads right in the middle. So it's a very simple application of our buffer tool. We're generating new vector features from an existing feature. Josie had mentioned range rings a few minutes ago. I'm actually going to defer. I had a little scenario, but I'm looking at the watch and it's not on our side. So range rings allow you to define the dimensions of a circle, or, as Josie had mentioned, concentric circles. Let's take a look at converting vector features. So far we've dealt with editing existing features, creating new features. Let's take a look at changing the parameters of a feature based on the geometric type. And for this, again, we'll open up yet another workspace. Now here we have a situation where we have a collection of points. I'm just going to close my overlay control center for the time being. These points are obviously representing the boundary of something. I think this may be the boundary of one of the towns. These point features could reflect something you collected in the field. Perhaps you walked the boundary of a property, collecting waypoints as you went. They are points. They are individual features. They are not related in any way, shape, or form in their current setup. What we want to do is determine the area that's inside. And in order for us to do that, obviously, we need to connect the dots. Fun game we used to play when we were kids. Global Mapper likes to play connect the dots as well. I'm going to select all of these points with my digitizer once again. You can see the red boxes indicating they're selected. I'm going to right-click. Now, you've seen the right-click menu quite a lot for creating features, for modifying features. The Advanced Feature Creation Options submenu is the place you'll go to create new data from existing data, essentially. We could buffer. I mean, here we could generate buffers. We can generate average point at center of selected point features. A lot of very powerful tools in here. What I want to do is actually generate a line from these selected points. Because they were consecutive in the way that they were collected, this should give me a straight line segment. How close do I want how do I need the lines to be connected? If I leave this at 0, it will basically connect them all. So I don't have to establish a minimum threshold. We'll just leave this as it is and define the parameters of our line. We had a residential road previously. We'll make this a, I don't know, we'll make it a town again. So we'll actually no, we'll make it a, let's make it a track log. We'll assume it's like something we collected with a GPS receiver. And I'll just leave it in the user created features layer. And you will see now we have a line segment. You'll notice a little gap at the end. So we've basically started from the first point that we collected and created a linear feature. Now we can select our line, right-click again, go through the same menu. Because it's a line that's been collected, there's a different set of options available, including creating a new area feature from that selected line. So we'll do that. And again, you have a dialog box offering certain settings or parameters. Do we need to have these as a minimum distance? How close do the sections of a line need to be considered one feature? You can have multiple lines and connect them all into one area feature. Because I have a single line segment, I don't need to worry about any of these. Again, I'll simply click OK. Define the properties of the line, of the area, I'm sorry. And once again, click OK. And again, visually on the screen, you can see now that that yellow highlighted feature is an area feature. So we went from points to lines to area. We can go the reverse. We can take an area. We can generate points along the area boundary, generate a line from the area. We can generate points from a line. I'm going to show you that one very quickly because some of these applications are very interesting. I'll just quickly draw a line in this case. Meandering line through my screen here. I'm not worried about the parameters of this line. But again, I'll select it. Couple of ways I can generate points along this line. I could generate points that reflect the location of the vertices. That's a pretty simple operation. Again, we're in the advanced feature creation submenu and create point features, create new points from selected line. That's basically take all my vertices and give me a point for every vertex. That's an easy one. The one right above is a little more involved, and this is a very powerful tool where we can actually create point features that are spaced along a selected line. So I can define the spacing parameters. Do I want a certain number of points along my line segment, or do I want them to be spaced based on a fixed distance? I'll go ahead and base these on, I don't know, let's do 2 kilometers. I'm just looking at my scale. You can keep the endpoints if they're there. You can also keep your existing vertices. I'm not in this case. And hopefully this will work and we'll see a series of points, equally spaced points, 2 kilometers apart along the section of line. If you're putting inspection points along a pipeline, for instance, this is a very simple way of doing it. I could also have defined the spacing based on the number of points that I wanted. Let's say I wanted 20 points stretched along this line. We could have done that as well. So those are just some examples of how we can convert points to lines, lines to areas, or any combination thereof. Those geometric features can be combined in many, many different ways. Couple of tips and tricks in the few minutes that remain. Couple of new tools maybe you haven't heard of. Maybe those of you who have been using Global Mapper, using the Digitizer, may not be aware of. One that I want to show you for creating points. Josie previously used a button in the toolbar, and she also referenced that right-click menu for creating points as well. A couple of options in here, that pointed position. You will notice in this right-click menu as well at the bottom, there's a quick point creator. Try saying that one 3 times faster, Josie. Quick point creator, quick point creator. There we go. This allows you to establish a library of point styles that you typically or routinely or repeatedly add to the map. And you'll see the setup button right here allows you to basically choose your own commonly used points. This window can stay open. As we add points, I'm going to add one of these guys over here. Again, we get the confirmation. That's fine, but we can again disable this dialog box if we want everything to be this particular type. This is just a type 1 that I created myself. We can just simply choose a different point now. We don't have to go to the individual feature type level. We can just simply choose it from this dialog box and again drop it on the map very quickly. So as the name implies, it is a quick point creator. Very, very useful tool for applying points of whatever styles that you think are routinely used or frequently used. In your case, you can build up, as I said, you can build up your own library. Another quick tip here. Back at the start, we talked about generating feature types as a way for you to define the parameters of the areas or lines or points that you digitized. I'll go back into the configuration dialog box again, reminding you, we created a new area style. But there's a lot of other stuff in here as well, perhaps stuff that you will never use. You can filter this list. You can remove what you don't need in here. In the vector display tab, in the filter list, you basically have checkboxes next to each type of feature. If you're never in the business of actually doing any crop mapping or mapping dry lake beds, you can remove what you don't need here simply by unchecking, adding your own feature types so that when you create a feature, let's say you draw an area, the list of options you see here is going to be limited to just what you need. You don't have to scan through all of the other pre-configured feature types. So that filtering option is extremely useful. Let's go ahead and show you that again. In the vector display tab under configure, or in the configuration dialog box, vector display, filtering options for areas, lines, and points. We've been dealing mostly with areas today, but the same procedure would work with lines and with points as well. One final thing that I want to show you, and for this, the final workspace I'm going to share with you today. And we'll go ahead and load the workspace. And this one's called Edge Match. Now this is a hidden function, or a kind of a creative use of an existing tool, maybe is the best way to describe this. Let's say I'm working in a digitizing process where I'm outlining perhaps property boundaries or town boundaries, and I have a situation such as you see on the screen right now. Here we have the final piece of the puzzle, so to speak. I need to digitize what's in the middle of this area. Now, if I show you the vertices here, I think I can do that simply by using my digitizer. You can see there's a lot of vertices around the edges of these. This would be a very laborious process for me to create something that fits right in the middle here, matching up every vertex so that there's no overlap and there's no slivers of or gaps between the two. That procedure would be extremely difficult. I'm going to show you a trick that will allow you to perform this action very, very quickly and very, very easily. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the area that I want to fill in the middle here. Now, I'm not going to draw it with any great care and attention. In fact, I'm simply going to draw it by very crudely drawing an outline around the edge, just making sure it encompasses the full extent of the area I'm trying to draw. And we'll just confirm, we'll make that a town because it's going to be in the towns layer. And I'll add it to my towns layer as well. And we'll click OK. Step 1 has been done. So basically I want to confine this area to the extent of the gap in here. Now the tool that I'm going to use to perform this is the same tool that we used a few minutes ago, but we're going to use it in reverse. Previously we used an area to create a hole in a polygon, or a donut as I described it. Now we're going to use the same cutting function to cut the middle polygon using the outer polygons as my cutters. Bear with me, this will all make sense in just a second. What I want to do, using my digitizer and holding the control button down, is to select the bounding polygons. Basically I've selected the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 polygons that surround this empty area. Obviously not the digitized feature itself. That's what's going to be cut. I'm going to use these surrounding polygons to cut the middle. So I'm going to do what I did previously, as I said, but in reverse. I'm going to go to the same menu item where I'm going to use my crop combine split functions tool. I'm going to cut selected area from another area. I'll let that sit for a minute so your brain can get around what exactly is going on here. I'm cutting the selected area from another area. The other area in this case is that very crudely digitized shape that I put in the middle. So we'll use this function. Once again, I'm being asked for the parent. I'm going to select right in the middle. Do I want to delete the internal polygon? In this case, I don't. So I'll simply select no. And lo and behold, right where my cursor is, I was able to, in a few seconds, draw a perfectly matched polygon fitting nicely within the bounds of where the adjacent polygons were. This can also be used simply if you have two side-by-side polygons or two side-by-side features, just to make sure they match up perfectly. Use that cutting tool. It's a very creative use, and you'll probably not find that particular workflow anywhere in our documentation, but a little trick that you can apply when using the Digitizer tool. Almost time to wrap up. Any final questions come in there, Josie?
Let's see. Here's one. Can the Digitizer be used to add new polygons to a shapefile?
Easiest way to answer that is probably yes and no. As you saw at the start, I was able to draw new towns, if you like, in an area, but remember, they are not actually added to the shapefile. That's something that would require an export. So I guess, no, you're not actually interacting with the shapefile real time, but yes, you can certainly export the shapefile, and if necessary, you can even override the final file. So looks like we are almost out of time. Sorry if we didn't get to answer all of your questions. Hopefully some of my colleagues sitting on the sidelines were able to answer those for you. If we didn't get to your question, we will follow up, or as I said previously, you can certainly use our email address, our email contact address, and indeed the forum to post any additional questions you have.
Thanks, David. And just so everyone knows, we've been recording the webinar, and it will be posted on our website within the next couple days. So if you need more information on the features we've covered, you can go back and review, and you can also check out other webinars that we've recorded and saved on the website. So thank you for attending, and thanks, David.
Thank you. I believe the next webinar, if you haven't already received an email, I think it should be arriving soon. And next webinar is going to be on scripting, a little more advanced functionality in Global Mapper, automated tasks. So we're looking forward to doing that one in September. So thank you for your help, Josie, today, and thank you all for attending.
You're welcome. Thanks.